She stared at the portrait on his wall, her mother's face staring back. How could this billionaire have it? One question would change everything. And the truth was more unbelievable than she ever imagined. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Ms. Love Stories channel, the place where love, drama, and unforgettable moments come alive. I'm so thrilled you're here, ready to dive into stories that will make your heart race, bring tears, and leave you believing in the power of love. Before we begin, I want to get to know all of you. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because in the next video, I'll give a special shout out to some of you amazing viewers from around the world. I can't wait to see how far our love story family reaches. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, so you never miss a single emotional journey. Get ready to feel, laugh, cry, and fall in love all over again. Because every story we share here is for you. Now, the story begins. Rose. Rachel tightened the thin scarf around her neck as she stepped out into the biting cold of her neighborhood. The wind carried the scent of wet asphalt and fried street food, a strange mix she had grown used to over her 16 years. Her eyes darted toward the crumbling apartment building where her mother rested, her frail body coughing softly from the illness that had refused to leave. Life had never been kind. Poverty was a shadow that clung to every corner of her existence. Every small hope weighed down by bills she couldn't pay and opportunities she couldn't reach. Her mother's photograph, now tucked safely in her bag, was her only tether to a family past she barely understood. She ran her fingers over the frame, feeling the warmth of memory and longing. Why had no one ever told her the truth about her mother's past? The question burned inside her, quiet yet relentless, and it followed her as she hurried toward the city streets, toward the life she dreamed of but had never known. Meanwhile, miles away in a world that felt impossibly distant from hers, McPherson moved through his mansion with the precision of a man who had learned to control everything except his own heart. The polished marble floors reflected the morning light, each ray slicing through the silence like a question unanswered. His suit was tailored to perfection, his hair neat, his expression calm, but beneath the surface his chest tightened with an old, unhealed wound. The walls of the mansion were adorned with photographs, portraits of past accomplishments and fleeting joys. Yet one empty space in his memory still gnawed at him. A secret he had buried, a life he had abandoned to protect himself, now lingered like smoke in the corners of his home. He sat at the grand mahogany desk, scanning emails with meticulous care, yet his mind wandered to the past. A past connected to a woman whose image he could never forget. He had believed that distance and wealth would erase the pain, but it hadn't. Not entirely. Not when shadows of what might have been haunted him in every silent hallway of his mansion. The world of Rachel and McPherson had nothing in common. She, fragile yet fierce, clinging to every fragment of truth about her mother. He, powerful yet hollow, commanding empires while avoiding the truths that might destroy him emotionally. And yet, fate had begun to stir in quiet, inexorable ways. The first tremor came from a photograph posted online. An image of a grand auction hall featuring McPherson's mansion. There, hanging prominently on a wall, was the unmistakable face of her mother, her eyes soft yet piercing, staring back at Rachel from a world she had never entered. Her fingers froze on the screen, heart hammering against her ribcage. How could her mother's portrait be there? What did it mean? Who was this man whose life seemed untouchable, yet somehow intertwined with hers? McPherson, in his mansion, felt a shift he could not explain. Something was approaching, an intrusion into his carefully controlled existence, a life that would challenge him in ways he had avoided for decades. A presence he could not predict, a force that would force the walls of his solitude to crumble. And so their worlds, so different in every visible way, moved toward the same inevitable collision. One was driven by unanswered questions and a desperate longing for truth. The other, by a haunted guilt and memories he had long tried to forget. Neither knew yet how intertwined their fates had become, but the first step had been taken. Rachel's hand trembled as she clutched her mother's photo. McPherson's chest tightened as he felt a chill run down his spine. Unexplainable yet undeniable. The question was simple but deadly in its consequences. Why is my mother's photo in your mansion? The answer, neither of them knew, would unravel everything they thought they knew about family, love, and the power of truth. Speech balloon. If you were Rachel, what would you do the moment you saw your mother's photo in a billionaire's mansion? Comment Bilou? The mansion felt impossibly quiet, even though the afternoon sun poured through the tall windows. Daniela's hands trembled as she held her mother's photo, her eyes never leaving Santiago's calm, unreadable face. The air between them crackled like electricity, charged with unspoken questions and the weight of decades. Why is my mother's photo here? Daniela's voice cracked, a mixture of fear, anger, and disbelief. Every word she spoke felt like a confession and a plea all at once. Her heart raced, the room spinning as her world teetered on the edge of collapse. She had come seeking answers, but the truth she had imagined was already slipping out of reach. Santiago's eyes widened just slightly, a micro-expression of guilt flickering across his face before he hid it behind his usual composed mask. He had anticipated interruptions, scandals, even hostile confrontations, but nothing like this. He had never imagined a daughter he didn't know, carrying a photograph, demanding a truth he had tried to bury. His chest tightened. A decade of careful distance, of controlling every empire and every secret, was about to come undone. Daniela's hands gripped the photo harder, her nails pressing into the frame. Who are you? How do you know her? Her voice was almost a whisper now, but her gaze was unwavering, searching his eyes for the slightest hint of recognition, connection, or honesty. Every second stretched, elongated by the tension in the room. Santiago's mind raced, memories flooding back like a tide he had long tried to dam. He remembered her mother, her laughter, the nights they had spent dreaming of a future that never came. He remembered choices he had made, choices that had haunted him every day since. And now, decades later, the universe had conspired to bring this girl, this daughter he had never met, into his home, holding a relic of a past he could no longer deny. The silence that followed was deafening. Neither spoke, but the air hummed with the weight of revelation. Daniela's chest heaved with the effort of holding back tears. Santiago's jaw tightened as he fought to keep control of his voice, his expression, his emotions. They were standing at the edge of a precipice, the world outside irrelevant. This confrontation was about truth, about past sins, about the collision of lives that were never meant to intersect. Until now. Finally, Santiago exhaled slowly. I didn't know you would ever see this, he said, his voice low, rough around the edges, vulnerable in a way he had not allowed anyone to witness. The words barely scratched the surface of what he felt, but it was enough to let Daniela see a crack in the armor he had worn for so long. Daniela's eyes narrowed, suspicion mixing with confusion and hope. She wanted answers, but she also wanted the truth to feel real. She needed him to admit it, not just with words, but with the weight in his eyes, the tremble she thought she saw when he looked at the photograph. The moment stretched, suspended in time. It was raw, it was painful, and it was electric. Both knew that nothing would ever be the same after this. Their lives had been set on a collision course, and the first sparks had ignited. Every heartbeat echoed the same unspoken question. What secret had been kept for so long? And could they survive the truth when it finally came out? Speech balloon. If you were Daniela, would you demand the truth now or walk away? Comment below what you would do. The confrontation had ended. Or at least it seemed like it. Daniela stormed toward the door, her chest heaving, hands trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. I don't even know if I want to hear the rest, she spat, her voice sharp and bitter. The photograph felt heavier in her bag now, as if the weight of untold truths pressed against her fingertips. Santiago watched her retreat, a flicker of regret crossing his otherwise stoic expression. He wanted to call her back, to explain, to reach across the emotional chasm that now separated them. But his pride and fear of vulnerability kept his words locked inside. He had spent decades protecting himself from pain, and the thought of unraveling in front of this girl, this stranger, terrified him. The mansion, so vast and imposing, suddenly felt suffocating. The silence that followed their argument seemed louder than any shouting, echoing off the marble floors and high ceilings. Daniela's mind raced with questions, suspicions, and the bitterness of betrayal. She wanted to demand the truth, but part of her wondered if she could handle it. Could she trust Santiago, the man whose life had intersected with her mother's in ways she didn't understand? Santiago walked toward the window, hands gripping the ledge as he tried to steady himself. Memories of the past assaulted him. Moments with her mother he had never spoken of. Mistakes he could never undo. The photograph in Daniela's hands was more than a picture. It was a symbol of everything he had tried to suppress. He wanted to explain, but every word felt insufficient, every attempt at honesty doomed to fall short. Days passed. Daniela avoided the mansion, retreating into the routines of her life. Each night, she would stare at the photograph, trying to piece together a story from a puzzle she didn't have the pieces for. Her mother's health worsened, each cough and fever reminding her that time was slipping away, yet she resisted reaching out to Santiago. Fear, pride, and confusion kept her at a distance. Meanwhile, Santiago continued his days with a restless emptiness. Meetings, phone calls, empire building, they all felt hollow. He couldn't shake the image of Daniela's eyes, the desperate, searching look that mirrored his own long-lost longing for connection. The mansion that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison. The world seemed determined to keep them apart. Friends and colleagues advised caution, warning Santiago of scandal or emotional exposure. Daniela received whispered advice to leave it alone, to focus on her mother's immediate needs rather than the mysteries of a billionaire's life. Yet neither could ignore the tug of fate, the invisible thread pulling them toward each other. And so, for now, both retreated behind their walls. Daniela's anger and suspicion kept her distant. Santiago's fear and pride held him in place. The truth waited, patient and relentless, ready to force them to confront it once more, but not until they were ready to face the consequences. The emotional tension simmered, a slow burn that promised eruption. Both knew that avoidance was temporary. Fate was not so easily denied. Speech balloon. Would you face someone who holds the truth about your family, or would you turn away? Share what you would do. The rain had started unexpectedly, a sudden downpour that left the streets slick and glistening under the city lights. Daniela had been walking home, clutching her mother's photograph under her jacket, when the first raindrops fell. Within minutes, the sky opened fully, drenching her. She ducked into the nearest building, which by sheer coincidence happened to be Santiago's mansion. Its grand lobby a glowing oasis of warmth and shelter. Santiago, having stepped outside to make a call, spotted her through the glass doors. His first instinct was hesitation. After the confrontation, he wasn't sure if he wanted to face her again so soon. Yet something in her soaked, shivering form stirred a protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. Without a second thought, he opened the door, and she stumbled inside, dripping rainwater onto the marble floor. Daniela froze, recognizing him instantly. What are you doing here?" she asked, voice tight, a mix of surprise and irritation. The air between them was charged with unspoken tension. The weight of the last encounter pressing down on every word, every glance. Santiago gestured to a nearby armchair. "You can't go out there like this. You'll catch a cold," he said, his voice calm but with a hint of concern. There was no condescension, only the undeniable authority that came naturally to him, but now softened by care. Reluctantly, Daniela allowed herself to sit. She refused to let her guard down entirely, yet she couldn't deny the warmth of the mansion and the subtle comfort of his presence. They were forced into proximity, a temporary reprieve from the world outside, yet an emotional cage as well. As the rain pounded against the windows, the silence between them was no longer hostile but waited, expectant. Daniela studied Santiago, noticing small details she hadn't before. The faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the tense set of his shoulders, the way he moved carefully around her. Santiago, in turn, observed Daniela, the clenching of her fists, the slight trembling of her shoulders, the way her eyes never left the photograph. The rain became a backdrop, a rhythm that mirrored the pulse of their unresolved emotions. Words were difficult but not impossible. Small talk gave way to careful questions, tentative admissions, and fragments of stories. Santiago mentioned his mother's photo, the circumstances that had led to it being displayed in the mansion, careful not to overwhelm her, to let her absorb the truth in her own time. Daniela asked questions, each one piercing, each one opening a tiny window into the past, and Santiago answered in measured, honest doses. For the first time since their encounter, the anger and fear began to coexist with something else, understanding. Their forced proximity had created a fragile space where walls could crack, if only slightly. They weren't friends yet, and the road ahead remained uncertain, but for a few hours, the storm outside mirrored the storm within, and allowed them to endure it together, if only in silence. By the time the rain slowed, the tension had shifted slightly. Daniela no longer wanted to flee, and Santiago no longer wanted to retreat. They had been forced together by circumstance, but now choice lingered in the air. And in that choice, the first seeds of a fragile connection began to take root. Speech balloon: have you ever been forced to face someone you feared, only to see them differently? Comment your story below. The fire crackled softly in the mansion's library, casting flickering shadows across the walls lined with books. Santiago and Daniela sat opposite each other, a low table between them. The photograph of her mother resting there like a fragile bridge connecting past and present. The storm outside had passed, leaving a quiet stillness in the air, one that demanded honesty. Santiago inhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. I suppose you deserve the truth, he began, his voice hesitant. Your mother. She was someone important to me. More than I could ever explain. But circumstances, decisions I made, well, they kept us apart. His eyes held a mix of regret and vulnerability, the kind that rarely surfaced in his public life. Daniela leaned forward, her curiosity and pain warring with caution. Important how? She asked, her voice trembling. She had always imagined her mother's past as ordinary, filled with small struggles, not connected to the life of a billionaire. Each word Santiago spoke seemed to shatter that expectation, and force her to piece together a reality she hadn't known existed. He sighed, looking at the photograph as though it carried a lifetime of memories. I met her when I was much younger. She was extraordinary, brave, selfless, full of dreams that didn't always fit the world she lived in. I loved her deeply, but I was reckless, focused on building something that would last beyond both of us. I thought I was protecting her, protecting you, even if it meant keeping distance. Daniela's throat tightened. The room seemed to shrink around her as fragments of her mother's life began to align with Santiago's words. Memories she had only glimpsed in old photographs and whispered stories suddenly clicked into place. She could feel the magnitude of what had been hidden, the sacrifices and secrets that had shaped her family without her knowledge. Why didn't she ever tell me? Daniela asked softly, almost accusingly. Her hands gripped the table, nails digging into the wood. Why am I just finding out now? Santiago's gaze dropped, his voice barely above a whisper. She wanted to protect you. She thought the truth would make things harder. And I thought I was doing the same. I underestimated how much truth you could handle, and maybe I underestimated how much courage you have. The room was heavy with silence. Daniela processed the story, her emotions swinging from anger to sadness to reluctant understanding. She realized that her mother's life had intersected with Santiago's in ways she could never have imagined, and that the love her mother had carried was still very much alive in the man sitting before her. For the first time, a genuine connection began to form between them, built not on proximity or circumstance, but on truth. The walls of pride and fear that had kept them apart began to crack, revealing glimpses of vulnerability and shared pain. Santiago's next words were almost a plea. I know this is a lot. I know it doesn't make up for the years lost. But if you'll let me, I want to be part of your life. Not just as someone who knew your mother, but as someone who cares for you. Daniela's chest tightened. Her heart ached with the weight of what she had just learned, but also with the flicker of hope that perhaps this man she had once feared and resented, might not be the enemy she imagined. The past had been unveiled, raw and painful, yet in that pain lay the possibility of something new. Understanding, reconciliation, and the fragile beginnings of trust. Speech balloon: if you discovered a secret about your family that changed everything, how would you react? Comment Billonaire? The following days felt like a fragile truce between two worlds. Daniela returned to Santiago's mansion, not because she trusted him completely, but because the truth he had revealed had planted a seed of curiosity and cautious hope. The mansion, once intimidating, began to feel less like a fortress and more like a space where they could explore the tangled threads of their connection. Santiago had arranged a small, private area in the library. A cozy corner with a soft rug and low chairs, away from the grandiosity of the rest of the house. "I thought we could sit here," he said softly, his usual authority tempered by gentleness. Daniela nodded, grateful for the calm and privacy, though her walls remained half-raised. They spoke in fragmented sentences at first. Daniela asked about her mother's favorite books, the places she had loved, and the dreams she had whispered late at night. Santiago answered with care, showing photos, old letters, and anecdotes that painted a vivid portrait of the woman Daniela had barely known. Every story, every laugh that escaped his lips, chipped away at her resistance. At one point, Santiago accidentally knocked over a small stack of letters. Daniela leaned forward to help, their hands brushing over the faded envelopes. The electricity between them was subtle but undeniable. "I guess some things never change," Santiago said, a soft smile breaking through. Daniela couldn't help but laugh, the sound lighter than she had felt in years. They shared memories, both old and newly discovered, creating a fragile intimacy built on honesty and mutual understanding. Santiago revealed some of his childhood fears and failures, his pride and ambition intertwined with vulnerability. Daniela admitted her own struggles, the loneliness she had carried, and the fear of trusting someone who had held secrets from her for so long. Hours passed unnoticed. The world outside the mansion ceased to exist. They were two people bridging a gap carved by time and secrecy, and slowly, a bond formed that was neither forced nor superficial. It was real, delicate, and terrifying in its potential. By evening, they were sitting side by side, the photograph of Daniela's mother between them. The firelight flickered, illuminating their faces, and for the first time, neither was defensive, and neither felt alone. There was a shared understanding that healing was possible, that trust could be rebuilt, and that love, unexpected, yet undeniable, was beginning to take root. Santiago reached out, lightly touching Daniela's hand, a gesture of comfort and solidarity. She didn't pull away. The moment was small, quiet, but monumental. It wasn't a declaration of love yet, but it was a bridge, a connection built on vulnerability, laughter, and shared memories. As they finally stood to leave, Daniela glanced back at the photograph. "Thank you for letting me see her this way," she whispered. Santiago's gaze softened. "No, thank you, Daniela, for letting me be part of it." The night ended with no promises, no declarations, but the unspoken bond was stronger than either had anticipated. For the first time, the possibility of love, unexpected and tender, seemed real. Speech balloon. Have you ever found comfort in someone unexpectedly? Comment if you believe in unexpected bonds. The fragile bond between Daniela and Santiago had been growing steadily, like a candle flickering in the dark. But as quickly as warmth had entered their lives, an unexpected storm threatened to snuff it out. It was a late afternoon in the mansion, and Daniela had returned for what she thought would be another evening of quiet bonding. She found Santiago on the phone, his tone unusually tense. He hung up abruptly, pacing the room. "It's complicated," he muttered. Daniela, sensing unease, waited for him to speak. But Santiago, never one to reveal vulnerability under pressure, gave nothing. Minutes later, the doorbell rang. A journalist, having caught wind of Santiago's past with Daniela's mother, demanded answers. The intrusion shattered the fragile safety of the mansion. Flashbulbs and harsh questions filled the air, and Daniela's photograph, the symbol of their newly forming bond, was taken and held up for the world to see. Daniela recoiled. "Why is this happening now?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear and anger. She felt exposed, her mother's memory laid bare to the world, and the fragile trust she had just begun to place in Santiago seemed to crumble. Santiago's face hardened, but there was a flicker of regret in his eyes. "I didn't want this," he said, trying to shield her from the storm outside, both literal and metaphorical. But the chaos had already entered the room, leaving no shelter from the consequences. Words were exchanged, harsh, bitter words that neither truly meant but that carried the weight of fear and frustration. "You could have told me sooner," Daniela shouted. "All of this could have been prevented." Santiago's pride flared. "I was trying to protect you. You don't understand what's at stake." The argument escalated until Daniela ran from the room, slamming doors and leaving Santiago standing amidst the echo of their pain. The warmth of the last few days evaporated, replaced by anger, misunderstanding, and the weight of betrayal. Santiago sank into the armchair, his head in his hands. The mansion felt empty, cold, and unwelcoming now. The journalist had left, but the damage was done. Trust, so painstakingly built, had been shattered in an instant. He wondered if Daniela would ever return, if their bond had been too fragile to survive the intrusion of the outside world. Daniela, meanwhile, sat in the garden, the chill of evening pressing against her. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she gripped the photograph, feeling both the presence of her mother and the absence of Santiago. The world outside had intruded into the private space they had nurtured, and she questioned if anything could ever be the same. For the first time, both realized that love and connection carried a price. Pain, misunderstanding, and fear were unavoidable companions. And in this shattering moment, they were left to confront the possibility that what they had fought to build could be irreparably broken. Yet even in despair, the bond they had shared whispered that reconciliation might still be possible, but only if they dared to confront their hearts, their pride, and the truth. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt everything fall apart in an instant? Comment how you would handle such a betrayal. The mansion felt eerily quiet after the storm of the previous evening. Santiago sat alone in the study, staring at the empty chair where Daniela had been. The weight of their argument, the intrusion of the world outside, and the fragility of their bond pressed heavily on him. For the first time in a long while, he confronted the raw truth. Love required vulnerability, and his pride had almost cost him the most important connection of his life. Minutes later, the doorbell rang. A journalist, having caught wind of Santiago's past with Daniela's mother, demanded answers. The intrusion shattered the fragile safety of the mansion. Flashbulbs and harsh questions filled the air, and Daniela's photograph, the symbol of their newly forming bond, was taken and held up for the world to see. Daniela recoiled. "Why is this happening now?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear and anger. She felt exposed, her mother's memory laid bare to the world, and the fragile trust she had just begun to place in Santiago seemed to crumble. Santiago's face hardened, but there was a flicker of regret in his eyes. "I didn't want this," he said, trying to shield her from the storm outside, both literal and metaphorical. But the chaos had already entered the room, leaving no shelter from the consequences. Words were exchanged, harsh, bitter words that neither truly meant but that carried the weight of fear and frustration. "You could have told me sooner," Daniela shouted. "All of this could have been prevented." Santiago's pride flared. "I was trying to protect you. You don't understand what's at stake." The argument escalated until Daniela ran from the room, slamming doors and leaving Santiago standing amidst the echo of their pain. The warmth of the last few days evaporated, replaced by anger, misunderstanding, and the weight of betrayal. Santiago sank into the armchair, his head in his hands. The mansion felt empty, cold, and unwelcoming now. The journalist had left, but the damage was done. Trust, so painstakingly built, had been shattered in an instant. He wondered if Daniela would ever return, if their bond had been too fragile to survive the intrusion of the outside world. Daniela, meanwhile, sat in the garden, the chill of evening pressing against her. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she gripped the photograph, feeling both the presence of her mother and the absence of Santiago. The world outside had intruded into the private space they had nurtured, and she questioned if anything could ever be the same. For the first time, both realized that love and connection carried a price. Pain, misunderstanding, and fear were unavoidable companions. And in this shattering moment, they were left to confront the possibility that what they had fought to build could be irreparably broken. Yet even in despair, the bond they had shared whispered that reconciliation might still be possible, but only if they dared to confront their hearts, their pride, and the truth. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt everything fall apart in an instant? Comment how you would handle such a betrayal. The mansion felt eerily quiet after the storm of the previous evening. Santiago sat alone in the study, staring at the empty chair where Daniela had been. The weight of their argument, the intrusion of the world outside, and the fragility of their bond pressed heavily on him. For the first time in a long while, he confronted the raw truth. Love required vulnerability, and his pride had almost cost him the most important connection of his life. Santiago stopped near the fountain, where water danced in sparkling arcs, catching the last rays of the sun. He looked at Daniela, his eyes full of sincerity. "I know we've been through so much in such a short time," he began, his voice gentle yet steady. "I can't change the past, but I promise to be honest, to be present, to honor the love we've discovered together." Daniela felt her heart swell, a mixture of relief, joy, and lingering vulnerability. I've been scared," she admitted softly, "scared of losing what we just found. But I also realize that hiding from love only makes the heart lonelier." She reached out and intertwined her fingers with his. They walked along the garden path, sharing laughter, memories, and quiet whispers, creating new moments that would forever belong to them. The photograph of Daniela's mother had been returned to its place in the mansion, but now it no longer represented secrets or loss. It symbolized the connection, understanding, and shared history that had brought them together. As night fell, lanterns glimmered along the walkways, casting a warm glow over their faces. Santiago pulled Daniela close, and for the first time in days, they allowed themselves to simply exist in each other's presence, unguarded and unafraid. The pain, the misunderstandings, the fears, all had been transformed into a foundation of trust, empathy, and love. Santiago smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from Daniela's face. "I never imagined finding love in a way I didn't expect," he said. "But I'm grateful for every step that brought me to you." Daniela rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. "Unexpected love. It's the kind that changes everything," she whispered, a smile breaking across her face. In the silence that followed, the mansion, the garden, and the fading sunlight seemed to celebrate their reunion. They had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and fear, but they had chosen each other. In that choice, they discovered the profound truth. Love, even when unexpected, could heal, redeem, and transform. As they stood together, hand in hand, the night air carrying the soft scent of roses, they knew their journey was just beginning. A journey filled with laughter, understanding, and a love that had been worth every storm they had endured. Speech balloon. Have you ever experienced unexpected love that changed everything? Share your story in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. Your time, your support, and your presence here mean more than words can say. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or kept you watching, please make sure to subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay blessed, stay strong, and keep believing in love. See you in the next story.